Life Fight with Jermaine Andre is a positive production of RareGem Productions. For previous episodes or to get new episode updates, subscribe to the Life Fight channel hosted on the Inspiration Network of OneRareGem.com. That's OneRaregem.com for the tools you need to take on your life fight. With U.S. Martial Arts Hall of Famer, two-time world champion, five-time U.S. champion, UFC vet, life coach, and author, Jermaine Andre. Visit JermaineAndre.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Life Fight with Jermaine Andre. I'm here, and I have my co-host with me, Rebecca Beck.
Hello.
And before we get started today, I'm going to bust Rebecca Beck out. She's not ready for this one. I didn't tell her about it in the car.
Oh.
So she's not going to like it.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to ask you a question. Before we came here, we went to the bank, and I'm going to ask you, what was the first thing you think about when you walk into the bank? What were you looking for? What were you thinking about? And you can't think about what you want it to be now that you're thinking about it and you're getting put on front. So you're like, what were you thinking about when you walked in?
It's probably different every time I walk in, but
like you think about making a deposit or getting some money out?
Sometimes I don't think about what could happen, but when I do think about what happens, I do think about what I would do if something would go down in the bank. So,
well, you know what I think about? The first thing I look for when I go to a bank is to make sure it's not getting robbed.
Well, yeah.
I check the doors. I make sure it don't look like the doors are locked. I make sure it looks at people who are coming out look happy. The people who are going in on stuff. And then I walk in and I check because people don't understand banks get robbed like crazy. Mm-hmm. They don't report it. They don't like the police get it. They don't even put it in it don't go on the news because the banks don't want you to know that because they don't want you to be afraid to come. But cats run in all day long. Like I know in U City, I got I can't even say his rank because I don't want to pull, but he's a very high ranking officer in U City who used to bodyguard for me. Mm-hmm. And he told me that those banks get robbed sometimes 5 times a day.
Wow.
Just in UC. I mean, crazy. He said we have 5 bank robs a day. They just come in, give me the money, give me the money, give me the money, give me the, they be mad. And the cops go chasing him. Right when they chase him, another guy come in. So it happens a lot. Yeah. But that's something that when I like to always talk about awareness that people don't think about is that banks get robbed. And it'd be horrible to walk in and walk into where you get stuck in a hostage situation where you could have just looked and said, oh, crap. Yeah. That dude's got M16 in his hand. Or, whoa, the bank tellers look a little shady right now. Yeah. Why is everybody on the ground with their heads down? And you just come walking in. Hey, I need to oh, man, crap.
Yeah.
So
I do like when you say that because I did go somewhere the other day. I don't know if it was the bank or not.
Car wash.
The guy, no.
Oh.
If he would have pulled a gun on the teller, it must have been a bank or something, Western Union or something. Yeah. And I said,
I remember.
I said, I was thinking about if he pulled the gun and he wasn't going to have somebody that was backing him up, I was thinking about what I would do to him. And I said, I'd go up and chokehold him. And you were like, no.
I said you get everybody in a place shot.
Right. But I do think about that when I go somewhere. I think about what I would do if I was in a situation.
Yeah, if somebody's in front of you and they pull a gun on the teller in front of you, you have to get control of the weapon. That's what I told you.
That made sense.
Somebody got a knife, a gun, a bat. You attack the weapon first. Yeah. Get control of that. Yeah, you put him in a rear naked choke, he's gonna go and he's gonna shoot about 30 people, before he passes out.
So I do think about that kind of stuff when I go there.
Well, this is the thing. Even though I busted you out, so now I got to bust myself out. It's nothing to feel bad about because actually my trainer Ron Smith asked me that before. He's like, man, when you go in the banks, what you think? Because Ron, he real on edge about everything. Yeah. And I was like, what am I supposed to be thinking, man? I'm just going to get some money. He said, you ever think about it might be getting robbed? I was like. He's like, and he told me the same thing I just told you. And I was like, well, he's right. And that could happen. That'd be the worst thing in the world is to walk into something like that. Yeah. But I just wanted to cover that on awareness before we got started. And having said that, that's even how everything I do, I always pay attention to what I'm doing, which like we were talking. If I go to the store, all the way from when I pull up. And even when I stop at a stoplight and it turns green, I don't go just because it turns green. Because I don't know if some food is going to come flying. So I look and make sure I'm clear. Then I go. And, when I pull up to a grocery store or anything like that, I'm checking cars. When I walk in, I'm looking to see what's going on while I'm even in there. Because somebody might, go in. Everybody start pulling out and get ready to throw down. And I can make a dash for the door and get out of there because I seen this guy looking nervous. What's he doing? And he's pulling something. He's got his buddy. He's signaling. I was like, oh, something ready to happen. All I need is those 2 seconds to make my move, and get out of there, whatever I need to do.
Along with awareness, I think it's just putting yourself in the situation. Like anywhere I go, like I was at the car, like you said, I was at the car wash the other day and I was vacuuming and I thought about if someone was going to come up behind me and try to either push me in the car or take me, what move would I use? And I always think about that. So, and it does, it doesn't make me, I don't live paranoid, and it's not that kind of lifestyle. It's kind of fun. Like, I just put myself,
like
I put myself in that situation. What would I do if someone came up in this situation? So,
well, and that's the good thing. Like you say, when you get that kind of training, it's not even something you have to try to do. Like, as far as you realizing car wash. Because you told me about that. I never even thought about the car wash. Because when I'm there, I'm a big muscle man. I'm not worried about somebody grabbing me and throwing me in the car. But you as a lady, you discovered that. Hey, Jermaine, when I'm at a car wash, I'm alone and in a secluded area.
Right.
And my vehicle's here with the keys in it.
Yeah.
This would be a good place for somebody to try and jack me,
right.
And you were like, okay, what can I do? And I was like, wow, well, that spray gun is serious pepper spray. You somebody right in the face.
Yep.
And that's what, the kind of things people don't think about. That's something simple. You spray in your car and wash it anyway. And even without that, you crack somebody in the head with that. It's got a metal end. You can crack their head. And that's kind of practical stuff that we try to get people to think about, just to be aware.
Right.
But that shows how it works, that even me teaching you as a student, that it comes back and you start even teaching me, because that's something I never would have thought of, because I'm not a woman. So I'm perfectly fine when I'm inside of a car wash or something like that.
Right.
One of the things is when we train people in self-defense, the main thing I try to teach is I say, boom, attack back hard and escape, get out of there. Well, you have to ask yourself, you say, okay, I'm attacking back hard and getting out of there. But hey, Jermaine, you said to destroy. Okay, yeah, because there could be. It depends on the time. It depends on where this happens. If it's a parking garage somewhere public, you attack back, boom, get them hurt, get away from them as fast as you can, get to safety.
Right.
But what if it's in your house and your kid in the back room?
Yeah.
You got to put them down and keep them down, put them down for good.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, they run out the front door. Oh, oops, Tommy's in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And then you got to run back in. You got to put this clown down and put him down where he's no longer a threat, and put him down for good.
Right.
So that would make the difference of when you attack and escape and you attack back and to shut a person totally down.
Right.
And now we're going to cover what I went over in class last night. I always like to cover what we go over in class. Intention was something I spoke with everybody after everybody trained. We have a lot of fun training. You got men in there, you got women in there, different ages. You got my fighters in there. Monday night we all train together, because I like to show everybody that no matter what level of martial artist you are, whether you're doing this for self-defense, you're doing this for, everyday, lifestyle, stress relief, you're doing this for as a competitor, everybody should be able to be together as martial artists. You shouldn't have to be separated. And I watch everybody train. Everybody has fun. There's a lot of talking going on. People having a good time, which is okay. But at the end, I told everybody, I said, look, you have to remember why you're learning the martial arts. The martial arts, martial means war. The war arts, the martial arts was designed for war. So when you're training, you have to, at least one moment during your training for 10 seconds or one round, deliver your techniques with violent intention.
Right.
You have to go in your mind and say, okay, this is the moment that I'm going to have to use this to destroy somebody who's trying to destroy me or my loved one. And you have to take your mind there and pretend, into that fantasy world, focus on your pad or focus on your back and hit it in that manner. Yeah. And it's so funny, because when people do that, you'll be dead tired in 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
You'll be like, but we do an hour and a half class. How many people you see in there like, is that it, sir? Is class over? Yeah, because you was clowning around having a good time, which is okay. We having fun while we're training, but you have to make sure that you always remember your intent. Yeah. Because, like I said, I said, guys, if you get attacked, you have to fight. Right. And it's not a thing of, and I've seen a lot of people look at me like, well, why do I have to fight? It's like, you train in the martial arts. Yeah. If you don't have to fight, who does? It's like, that'd be like a cop getting attacked. Him just, can somebody help? And just laying there and not fighting back. Right. You're training the martial arts. You're receiving all of this, where, you have to be careful. Where I have that old saying, be careful what you claim to be, because someday someone may challenge you. Right. That, run around and you got your chest stuck out, got your T-shirt on. I train with Jermaine, Andre with the world champ. I hitting the pass hard, feeling cool, making people feel intimidated that you're a martial artist. And then when the true test comes, right, you feel that you don't have to stand up with it. Right. And that's where, I say you get cursed by the martial spirit, because you've been sitting here pretending all this time and receiving the gratitude and the awards. Yeah. Hey, what do you do? I'm a martial artist. I train in Muay Thai. Oh, wow. You're tough. Wow, you're incredible. Yes, I sure am. That's right. I could kick your butt if I want. And then the time comes in the alley where some dudes who ain't playing, that's serious, get ready to take you out, and you say, well, I don't want to fight. Yeah. What you mean you don't want to fight? It should be, it's about time I get to try this stuff out on you fools. Right. Yeah. That's where the head should almost be at.
Well, it also teaches you which, like when you tell them to put themselves in that mindset, that's when you also can figure out what techniques it is that you want to use when you're in that situation. And that's really important.
Exactly. You know what? How we do that sometimes is I'll tell everybody, if you got in a situation, what are you going to use?
Yeah, you got to
right
pick
cross,
your favorite technique.
Elbow,
yeah.
a knee to the groin. You got all these moves you learn. What weapon are you going to pick?
Yeah.
You know, and you should be practicing with that all the time and building it, making it strong. You know, if you're going to hit somebody with an elbow, you should be able to hit that brick wall with your elbow. Not super hard and break it, but at least where you can, you know, practice, and you should be able to hit every bag, not hit the bag and go, I hurt my elbow.
Right.
And you plan on that being your weapon of choice to use. So,
Right.
But it was good coverage on intention, you know, and as far as you listeners, if any of you guys are martial art trained, you train in martial arts, make sure that when you are training, you have to have that moment, you know, because training can be fun, it can be, you know, exhilarating, but you have to have that moment where you look at that pad of that bag and say, this is it.
Yeah.
It is on. I have to destroy this individual in front of me until I cannot breathe.
Right.
And go as hard and as long as you can until you can't breathe. And
Right.
see what happens. It won't take long.
Well, and that's important because, you know, not everybody who trains in MMA is a fighter. So you have to teach that other entity that still uses MMA for fitness and everyday use that they got to put themselves in that mindset. So,
well, it gives the reality because this is the thing, like, you know, you do a martial art class. Some martial art class will be 3 hours long, you know. Some will be an hour and a half long. Some an hour long. You know, usually it won't be any shorter than that. And they say, I got to do this long class to get a good workout. And I say, well, you know, it's not how long your class is or how long you go. It's what you get accomplished in a period of time. You know, and I got to an argument with one of my students, and he was a personal trainer, certified, you know, studied all this stuff online. I think he even went to college. And I told him, I said, you know, you need to do this program I got. It was a 20-minute program where it burns you out. And then he's like, well, I'm trying to get rid of fat. I said, that'll get rid of fat. And he said, you know, no, the longer you train, the more fat you burn.
Right.
I said, no. I said, this program right here, if you do it, it's going to burn you out quick. And he said, well, that's textbook. I said, okay. And I flexed my arm. I said, this is textbook. I said, this is the laboratory right here. Now you tell me, man. I said, now hold, I'm going to ask you this. So you're telling me that an aerobics class that goes an hour long, hour 15, they burn more calories than MMA fighters when we do 3 5-minute rounds?
Right.
And then he just kind of looked. I said, that's the truth right there. We go in and do those 3 5-minute rounds. We burn probably about 100,000 calories.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because we're going so hard and burning so much, and the speed's going so fast. So that's something good for people, like when they think of that intention and they go hard and fast like that, that's going to change their training too.
Absolutely.
And they're going to get more done in that hour and a half where, you know, 45 minutes in, you should be almost dead. And the rest of it, you just cruising through.
Right. Makes sense. That's why I like the bat station. When I put the girls through training, I always make them use a bat. Go to one station, pick up a bat
on the bag,
and hit a bat, and they just go to town. And
the station I call "Owe Me Money." Tell them to beat the bag like somebody that owe you some money. Get my money out of them. Get my money. You ain't give me no money. Come on, that's like $1. Hit him harder.
They all love it.
I know he got more money in his pocket than that. Hit him harder. Yeah, that's good. But that moves us right into our main topic today, which is MMA versus sport MMA. And I'm wanting to bring a lot of clarification on this because sport MMA has overshadowed MMA. And it was really interesting, the question you asked me. You know, you said, well, MMA was first before sport MMA. And actually, it really wasn't. And I'm going to define both. You know, MMA is mixed martial arts. So legally, you know, it would be the mixing of any martial arts. If you take Taekwondo and karate and put it together, that's MMA. That's a mixed martial art. But what has happened, because sport MMA has become so popular, which sport MMA is the actual competition,
right,
where guys go in and they compete. And what they're doing is they're using MMA to compete against each other, is what's happening. And sport MMA has kind of overshadowed MMA,
right,
but sport MMA was first.
Right.
And the way sport MMA came when, and I don't want to say, I could say Ultimate Fighting, it was actually called No Holds Barred. And that before that, you know, you have people who argue that was called pancration. Me personally, I'm not what you call an internet arguer. You know, you can go on the internet and look up all this stuff, and, you know, people come back and this and that, and it says it because, you know, there's different things on there also. And that's not saying I don't want that kind of a person who likes to research like that.
Right.
We always happy. So somebody will go to my Facebook page and say, Jermaine, it was called Wop the Wop, back in 1615 when the Greeks fought and somebody come up with some new info. That's cool. I'm cool with that. But that's not what I do. I give you my answers off my personal experiences.
Right.
And when I came into the game, it was called No Holds Barred, NHB. And it was Muay Thai versus Judo, Jiu-Jitsu versus Karate, Judo versus wrestling. Everybody had one discipline or one art they trained in, and you went in and you fought to see who won. Well, as the sport started to grow and it started to evolve, the guy who knew judo said, man, I got to learn how to learn boxing because I got punched in the face a lot. Right. So then he went to a boxing coach and started learning boxing. And then the guy who got thrown that knew Muay Thai said, man, I got to learn judo and learn how to stop. And so they started mixing everything together and then would meet back up and compete. So the sport of MMA got more popular because there was money there and it was more exciting. Right. So it became more popular. And I think the regular MMA, the spirit of it got lost, and the value of it, of what it can do for people, got lost. And I think everybody's confused now, and they think that MMA is only sport MMA. It's only cage fighting. That's MMA, but that's not MMA. Even though that's what made MMA popular. MMA is the mixing of several martial arts.
When I think in it getting popular, I think that it confused people to. It confused a person to think that they couldn't do MMA without becoming a fighter, and that's the difference that I'd like you to talk about. Okay,
yeah, definitely. Well, like we say, sport MMA is what made MMA popular,
right?
So I'm thankful for sport MMA,
absolutely,
because people wouldn't even know what it was if it wasn't for the efforts of the UFC, King of the Cage, Pride. I can go down the line. Rage in the Cage, Rings, where I fought for, the WFA World Fighting Line. And I can go down. And there's so many promotions out there that promoters who put their blood and their heart and soul into this, and they didn't win, and they're out there broke right now. You know what I'm saying? Because it's just like this. That's the thing now. I know one of my customers was talking to me about MMA and how you see now the MMA fighters are making decent money. You see a few that are in the millions. And I told him, I said, MMA fighting competition nowadays, it's not like football. Somebody asked me, say, well, Jermaine, would you go back? I said, yeah, if somebody wants to give me a signing bonus that's going to buy me a house and a Porsche, not where I'm making payments, where I'm going to buy it, like football players get a $5 million signing bonus to sit on the bench for 2 years, take an injury, and then get paid to be injured. You want me to come back like that? Hey, let's talk some business. Let's go. But MMA is not at that level. I don't think there's even retirement benefits or anything like that. And if we go back in history to the pioneers of MMA, those of us who created it, we weren't getting paid anything. As the world champion, I retired broke. I got my belt is the most expensive thing I got. It's a $7,000 belt with jewels. It's the most expensive belt ever made. It's from Las Vegas. They made it for Las Vegas, so it's a nice belt. But that's the most expensive thing I had. Everything else I made came after that. Of me hustling and training people and getting out there and bodyguarding and training security and running a school and stuff like that. So there's not a ton of money in MMA nowadays. Not as a competitor, not as someone who owns a school. Not as when I do a Muay Thai camp, I'm not making with the basketball players when they do a basketball camp, and the kids come out. So moving along, one of the main things we're going to compare MMA versus sport MMA, and I got a list, and this is a list we're going to go through. We're going to go through which one is more athletic, which one is more practicable, which one is more learnable, which one is safer, which one is more popular, which one is more structured, which one is more disciplined, and which one has more integrity. So these are some of the things in regards to fitness and martial arts that I think we're going to compare it to. Now, before we get into it, I got to make a very, very important point, and that is that the true result of any type of training is going to depend on the trainer and the student. Mm-hmm. So you can have even though we're going to go through all this stuff and compare it, that doesn't guarantee you anything. If your trainer's horrible, know, but it doesn't guarantee you anything if you got a great trainer and the student's horrible. So you got to, so even as a student, if you're somebody who's out there and you're looking for, a good MMA training facility and somewhere to train, you can use these as guidelines, but you have to get to know that instructor. You need to check their credentials, and then they can have great credentials. Like I know before, I was talking before about some of the MMA fighters out there. And people ask about getting instructed by them. I say, there's a lot of talented fighters, but you can't teach talent.
Yeah.
You can't pass on talent. So just because somebody's a great fighter doesn't mean they're going to be a great teacher.
Right.
Because there's actually guys out there who probably are horrible fighters who might be great teachers, who could be good instructors, But I always say the most important thing when you find an instructor, you got to find somebody who's got a sense of compassion and care towards mankind. You don't want to go to these bloodthirsty cats, who are just out but want to bust heads and, let's just kick some butt, because it's going to flip on you.
Yeah.
If they feel like that towards their other neighbors, they feel like that towards you too. All they're doing is looking, at that dollar bill that you're bringing in.
Right.
And they're not interested in anything else. The first thing I want to compare MMA versus sport MMA is on athleticism. Which one is more athletic? What do you think?
Sport MMA.
Definitely. Sport MMA has evolved so greatly with the martial arts, because you look at MMA. When I say MMA, remember I'm saying that could be karate and taekwondo, jiu-jitsu and boxing, in a kind of traditional type school is what we're talking about when I say MMA. Muay Thai and judo, anything like that, where they're not training to compete.
Right.
These are people who are doing it for fun or for self-defense on the streets. Okay, but sport MMA has come to a level where these athletes are getting sponsorship. Science is getting involved, with the actual way to train the muscles, actual proper eating so you can have explosion,
right.
Proper training so you can have power and strength plus flexibility, so it's really becoming a science now for sport MMA. And if you look, you look at the pro MMA fighters, and I'll say top pros, because you got a lot of pros who don't reach, who don't meet the level that I'm talking about. But you look at the top pro MMA fighters. MMA fighters are probably the best physically fit athletes on the planet.
Right.
That's top. And I know this because I was actually one of the top. I probably was the top physical fit MMA fighter during my era. If you look at even my opponents, nobody was shredded like I was.
Right.
Even though I think I say Ron June was probably the closest one to me. He was ripped pretty good, but still, even as shredded as I was shredded like sport MMA guys are today. But I was also, when I trained, I focused a lot on my physical fitness. I was into flexibility versus strength and power,
right.
and I was experimenting on myself.
Right.
And I would test and lift weights and see. So I was the lab, and I say, man, I'm too slow. I'm too big. Wow, I really got tired that fight. I need to back off the weightlifting, because I know weightlifting, to be strong, it compresses the muscles.
Right.
It makes you where you can barely move. That's how you get strong. And I need flexibility. I need speed. So I was leveling myself out through my fight career, and you can even see that as you watch me as I'm getting better and better.
Right.
Well, now they're doing it in the lab, and everything I was doing, they know, and these fighters, they're giving them that information in a book. They're giving them information in training. So sports, I would definitely say sport MMA is is better for athletics. Plus, when we're talking sport MMA, we're saying if you're looking at it from a level of you're going to compete or you're training with competitors, whenever you have competition coming up, you have, you're afraid.
Yeah.
You're nervous. There's more intensity in the training. So the guys that's training for sport MMA over here, they're busting it, hitting it hard. They're giving it all, leaving everything on the floor. Where people training MMA, they don't have to train that hard because nothing's coming up.
Yeah. And
we know that 99% of people don't think they'll get attacked tomorrow, and they need to be in shape to defend their life tomorrow morning or tonight.
Right.
So they still can say, I'm gonna hold back a little bit.
Right.
The trainer or the instructor or the assistant, they can still say, I don't have to push everybody too hard today. Somebody might quit and I'm going to lose some accounts,
Right.
But the sport MMA, you got to say, like that's like me training my fighters for sport MMA. Man, what are you doing? Quit talking over there. Da-da, smack him in the head, kick him in the leg. You got a fight coming up. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, you're right. I sure do. And I can talk to them like that to make them give their all.
Right.
So I would definitely say sport MMA has on the athletics. The next one is which one is more practical? What do you think?
More practical? I'd have to say it.
And you got to say, we got to say practical for what?
That's true. In my eyes, when you say practical, I think for everyday use, which I would say is MMA, because self-defense is still probably what you feel that you need for the most everyday use. And in sport MMA, they don't really teach self-defense.
You can use sport MMA for self-defense.
Yeah.
If you get good enough at it and you get strong. Because this is the things, MMA, sport MMA competitors are strong and they're in shape.
Yeah.
They're extremely athletic.
Yeah,
so,
but they ban what we teach for self-defense. So,
yeah, definitely.
Which
yeah, you
means
can't,
that
it's more effective.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, if you go back to MMA, and let's say we're going to go karate, and I'm going to speak karate, I'm going to speak kung fu, and we're going to use the eye flick. Mm-hmm. And we're going to use a palm strike to the nose. We're going to use a web hand throat strike to the throat. We're going to use a hammer fist, bare knuckle hammer fist to the head. We're going to use a front snap kick to the groin.
Right.
So all that stuff is banned in sport MMA. The reason it's banned because it'll work.
Right.
You stick your finger. What happens when somebody gets poked in the eye in sport MMA? They stop. Don't do that again.
Done, right.
You can't do that again. You get in trouble. What happens if somebody gets kicked in the groin? You get a break because they know, ooh, yeah, that really works. And we don't want the fight to end that fast. So as far as being practical, yeah, I would say MMA is for the everyday person to use for self-defense because, like I was saying too, sport MMA people, the battle is more of a battle of fitness and strength and power. Even though technique and skill does come into play, you still can't take a guy and say, okay, we're going to take these two guys and this guy's going to go train MMA. We're going to teach him all these moves, a million moves, every move, and we're going to take this guy and we're just going to get him in shape, let him kick and punch the bag and this and that. He's not going to learn as many. Yeah. You put them together. The guy that's in shape is going to destroy the one who's not in sport MMA. You know what I'm saying? Because he's going to run and he's going to wear that guy down with footwork, with movement. And all he needs is a few weapons. He doesn't need a lot because he's strong. Right. And he's quick. The science, he's going to be moving too fast for this guy who knows all these techniques. Right. But having said, as far as MMA being practical for everyday people, the 70-year-old woman walking down the street need to know how to stick her finger in somebody's eye. Right. It's not going to do her any good to learn sport MMA and trying to throw a six-piece jab across to somebody when, she doesn't have the strength and the power to knock a man out. Right, absolutely. So I would definitely pick MMA for that one. Learnable. Which one is easier to learn for everyday people?
So the question is always going to be for everyday people.
And this is the thing. It still goes to, like I said, it depends on the instructor and the student. That's always the main one.
I would say that's a tough one. More learnable, I would say. I like the idea of learning something and it being something that I can carry through.
Which one do you think is easier to learn?
Well, I've never done sport MMA, so.
You do sport MMA every day. You just get it mixed in with MMA.
Yeah, that's true.
Sport MMA, because you know why? Sport MMA doesn't require as much technique, precision. You can go to a MMA competitor where they have competitors and walk right in and just start punching the bag. Nobody's going to tell you need to put your foot here, you need to be straight, hey, you need to squat down, you need to hit straight. As long as you hit hard, they're going to say, cool, good job. As long as you kick hard, like I notice most sport MMA people who try to use a Muay Thai round kick. I don't think I've met many who even throw it correctly according to Muay Thai. Right. That doesn't mean that what they do doesn't work. The way that a lot of sport MMA people throw the round kick, it works still. Yeah. But that's not the proper way that Muay Thai kickboxing throws it. And look how long it takes when somebody comes and joins us and they want to learn Muay Thai. How long it takes for them to get the Muay Thai round kick down. Right. Correctly, the way it's taught in Muay Thai. Right. A long time. It takes, it could take a year or two before your body picks up and you really develop the true power. Right. And that's why a lot of sport MMA, when people train in sport MMA, they don't learn a lot of techniques correctly because they're trying to learn faster. Right. The whole idea of sport MMA is to get out there and compete. Right. To learn this and get out there and get in the ring or get in the cage as fast as humanly possible and use what you got. Right. So I think sport MMA would be easier, is more learnable, would be easier to learn because the expectations of doing it properly are lower. Okay. Because if you're strong and in shape, that I think that the coaches and everybody else, that you can go in there and knock somebody around, knock them out, they're not going to spend much time correcting you or holding you back, which is something I usually will do. Yeah. I'll hold a fighter back and say, yeah, you're really good, but we can turn that round kick into a nuclear warhead if you take more time to learn it correctly instead of just going out there and doing it wrong. Because once you get comfortable doing it wrong, then you can't get any better. Right. So I would say sport MMA is more learnable. Ooh, the next one. Which one is safer?
I mean, MMA.
Again, going back to, of course, we know sport MMA. Usually, you go to a sport MMA gym. It's a bunch of head busters. It's a bros place. Yeah. Everybody's in there. Just beating each other up. And even if it's not with bad intention, it's to get ready for a fight, see who's the best. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I did sport MMA, and a matter of fact, when I was fighting, if you came to my school, most of the time we try to run you out.
Yeah.
We didn't want people that are slowing down because I had a fight coming up. So if you couldn't keep up and take the hard leg kicks and go through the heavy stuff, have a nice day.
Yeah.
Now, to say which one is safer, again, of course, it depends on the instructor and the way he runs things. Because if you go to MMA and we say just mixed martial arts, and you got some old school karate instructor, who ain't playing, and he's kind of wild. I've seen guys get their ribs broken, and get injured also in regular martial arts schools. But sport MMA probably would be less safe. Yeah. Because the one thing that I think is that it lacks is the structure and the discipline of holding back, where MMA, most of your martial arts schools, they still don't have that intensity of, attacking so hard and I got something coming up. So I got to, I need to test to see if I can really take you down. Yeah. And I think that when you got that going on in a sport MMA place, that's going to make things a little less safe than, in a regular MMA.
Which I like the idea. I like the idea that everybody is capable of doing MMA. That you don't have to walk in and learn MMA and have to be a fighter. So I like the idea that people still can walk in, to an MMA school, like you said, of course, depending on which school you go to, because I know there's a difference between a lot of them, and that I can use it for personal protection, for fitness, for fun, and I still can do it and not say, okay, well, I have to do this and become a fighter. So that's the difference that I like about it. So
there's the as a MMA person, and me being a person who loves MMA, I have to protect the thought of, like you're saying, that people think, just like with our kids. Our kids train in MMA at Andre's Academy at my school, which we had to change the name from Andre's MMA to Andre's Academy because MMA was destroying our business. Yeah. It was destroying.
Well, they only related to this on TV.
But they related to what they said. That's
the
highlights. That's what gets shows is who got their head busted tonight. And a guy jumping up with blood covered on his face saying, yeah, I just halfway killed somebody. Yeah. So these parents will see that, and our parents be like, oh, you need to bring your kid up to train with my kid in MMA. I'm not bringing my kid up there to do what I just saw on Channel 5. Yeah. You out of your mind. Right. So it was destroying the business. Right. But that's where I definitely have to protect MMA from sport MMA. That, absolutely, like you say, a good MMA instructor that's not just doing sport MMA, anybody should be able to go there and learn. Yeah. And it's really good for kids because kids need, it's just like if your kid's learning Taekwondo, which I think Taekwondo is really good for kids. It's got good discipline, teaches flexibility, speed, power, everything. And it's got, like I said, the main thing I like is the discipline that they make hold, just like karate. But your kid's learning all this, he's getting good, and then by the time he turns 14, 15, he runs into the neighborhood bully who's been learning wrestling. Right. And he gets in his stand. This dude shoots in, takes him to the ground. He's getting destroyed. Mm-hmm. It's game over. He's going to get smashed. And it happens all the time. So your kid who's in Taekwondo needs a mixed martial art. They need to know some type of ground fighting also in case they have to defend themselves on the ground. Right. So that doesn't mean they have to be an MMA fighter. Yeah. And go in the cage and start busting heads. Right. But it still should be known to the general public, to fitness enthusiasts, to martial art enthusiasts, to kickboxing enthusiasts, to all those people who want to better themselves, that you can learn MMA. And absolutely, you don't have to be a head buster. You don't have to be a fighter. Same thing for the ladies. Mm-hmm. A woman who can defend herself on the ground. Yeah. I remember when I was teaching women self-defense, and I had to stop teaching ground stuff to women because it was just too weird. Yeah. But when I was teaching women self, when it first came out, we started doing grappling, and I was teaching women self-defense. It ended with ground fighting. Right. And I would have to show them, open your legs like this. Yeah. And wrap your legs around. I remember one time I was in the gym teaching, and my gym was in the back of this weight room, a Wolf's Gym Fitness Zone in Illinois. Yeah. And my gym was in the back, and I had these models, and I was training them. Well, everybody in the gym, so we had to walk through the gym to get to my gym. If we walk through, everybody's looking. I got all these beautiful models with me, and we walk in, and we go back there, and I'm back there training one of them. And I'm like, I'm telling and everybody can hear me in the gym talking. I'm like, all right, open your legs. Now I need to get down between your legs. Now wrap your legs around me. All right, now you see the position I'm in here, right, and I'm going to push my. And they came running in there. They're like, "What are you doing in here?" Right. And I had no idea. Right. I'm just like, "Oh, we're just training," and they're looking. And I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" I didn't even think of how that sounds. They're like, "Dude, we thought that you guys were over here." You know what I'm saying?
That's for a reality
show.
So
it's weird. Yeah, I know, but it's weird. Right. But I'm showing this girl that this is the position that this guy, if somebody attacks you, wants you in. Yeah. and now you can break my arm.
Right.
Now you can wrap your legs around my head and choke me unconscious.
Right.
You know, and I'm sure they're like, oh my goodness. You know, so women, it's still good for women to know, because that would be the end result of a attack of that sort, is that he wants to be in this position, which is the position we fight from.
Right.
If I go on the ground, what I'm trying to do, first thing I'm trying to do is get back to my feet, you know, because I believe you best fighting on your feet than on the ground. But if I'm on the ground, I'm going to wrap my legs, or I want you between my legs.
Right.
Now it's game over for you. Once I get to my guard, you know, I got arm bars, key locks, leg. I can attack anything, choke you out, whatever I want to do.
Right.
So we definitely want to defend that.
Yeah,
as
but
far as
you still could teach the everyday person just a few really basic ground moves for self-defense. They don't always have to learn the entire system
of course,
to understand self. Because most of the time when you're down there, and if you have some kind of awareness of what you should use, the rest probably is going to come pretty naturally.
Well, I mean, let's keeping it real. You know, like when I teach even women in self-defense on the ground, when I was showing them the arm bars and key lock and all that, that was more for fun.
Right.
And to give them something fancy.
Right.
You know, just like I teach you guys, what do? You stick your finger in his eye.
Yeah.
Just like I do. If I go on the ground on the streets, I'm not going to be sitting there putting arm bars on you.
Headbutt
I'm going to stick my finger, I'm going to fish hook your
Yep.
mouth, I'm going to clap them ears, I'm going to rip an ear off, 15 pounds of pressure, take your ear off.
Yeah.
Here's your ear.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Boom, hammer's fist, that groin.
Yeah.
You know, you want to do the stuff that's banned in ultimate fighting,
Yeah.
you know, that you can't use.
Which is why it's more practical.
There you go. That's true. Yeah. So which one was that? Well, safer.
Yeah.
So definitely, that's my response on that one. Moving to the next one, popular. We know which one is more popular, and we've kind of just covered that with what we were saying about the sport MMA being all over TV and the highlights being, you know, the fighting, which I'm not speaking bad about it at all, because you're giving America what they want. You know, you go to a baseball game and somebody hits the ball out the park and a big fight starts in the audience at the same time. Where's the camera going?
Yeah.
Woo, to the fight. What's the first thing they're going to show on the news that night? Big fight, big right. You know what I'm saying? And this is what's really funny. Have you ever been to an MMA fight and saw what happens when a fight happens in the audience?
Yeah. No,
Everybody look at the fight in the audience.
Right.
You could have the two top fighters in the world fighting in the cage.
Yeah.
And when a fight starts in the audience, everybody looks in the audience. You know why? Because they want to see some blood.
Yeah.
They want to see somebody get hurt bad. And they know there's rules on the cage fight. Saying nobody might not get hurt. And them two guys in there throwing and doing perfect technique, and they will turn, ooh, it's a fight, it's a fight. They will run to go see that instead of watching the fight they just paid $400 to come and see. So when it comes to ultimate fighting and MMA fighting, when they're showing the highlights and everything like that, you see it on TV, is getting people confused with what MMA instructors are doing. Like I tell people, we're not teaching people to bust heads.
Right.
MMA fighting is something that mixed martial artists do.
Yeah.
That's just something that we do. I'm a mixed martial artist. I'm an MMA guy, but that's something I can go do if I want to with my talent.
Absolutely.
So we know that sport MMA is definitely more popular, and I'm trying to bring the popularity of MMA training up for everybody, that you don't have to be a sport MMA fighter.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to participate in that kind of hardcore heavy training to learn MMA.
To learn it. Because truthfully, a lot of your people who come to you just for fitness are the type of people who, after years of training, probably can be some of the greater fighters out there, because their mindset wasn't that I want to come in here just because I want to be on the UFC. It's that I came in here, I wanted to learn fitness, I wanted to get in shape, I wanted to learn self-defense, and they're the breed that I believe that ended up becoming some of the best fighters out there.
Well, you know why? Because they learned the martial arts correctly.
Yeah, they learned
That's
the
what
right
they
way.
took the time.
Right.
I mean, the guys who come to us and say, well, I just want to get in shape.
Yeah.
Well, this is what we use to get you in shape.
Right.
Okay, well, how do I do it, sir? Well, your foot's wrong. Well, okay, where do I need to put it? Right here. Now, they're not trying to hit the bag hard and impress everybody.
Yeah.
They're just trying to do it correct. 3 months later, bow, boom, bow. Everybody's looking down. Is that one of your fighters? No, he would never fight. He's just somebody who's just having fun training. He's kicking harder than the fighters are.
Yep.
Yeah, because he took his time to learn the martial arts.
Yep.
And that's what a lot of sport MMA, what happens, a lot of people involved in sport MMA don't want to learn the martial arts.
Yep.
They just want to, boom, get enough weapons to go out there and bang it out. And that's why I feel sometimes that it's getting more to a tough man state than actual martial arts.
Yeah.
Because even if you, like I say, you even look, and you can look at some of the highlights of MMA fights. And they'll be just swinging like this with their eyes closed and swinging like, what do you call it, the windmill? I mean, I'm like, what are they doing? Is somebody will get knocked out?
Yeah.
There was no skill to it, no setup, no nothing. It was just them swinging eyes closed, and then they'll say, this is the greatest striker in the world. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
We're on the schoolyard, But he got the job done.
Right.
That's the thing. We don't care about his technique. We care about him knocking somebody out. But I always say I never wanted to be that type of fighter where I went in And I just started swinging, and I'm saying I could take more hits than him, and I hope I get him.
Yeah.
Because, okay, I knock him out. I don't even have confidence I'm going to knock the next guy out because let's go back and look at the video. And if I look sloppy like that and it was luck, I'm going to be scared to death of the next one.
Right.
So I always make sure when I get you, I'm going to make sure I got you where I want you because you ain't the last guy I got to go for. Mm-hmm. After I knock you out, it's going to be somebody bigger and badder looking to get at me.
Right.
So I better have my stuff down,
right.
Where I can do it correct, or else I'm not even going to throw that punch.
Right.
All right, the next one, discipline. Which one do you think is more disciplined? That goes without saying.
That kind of covers everything we just talked about.
And it's fun because when I first started jiu-jitsu grappling, and I was introduced to one of the instructors, and I walked out to learn, and Brian Madden told me about how he said, hey, this Brazilian jiu-jitsu stuff, they don't wear belts. They don't bow. I said, they don't bow.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, they don't. All that stuff doesn't matter. All that matters is if you can fight. And I said, and that made sense because we know that you had the all super black. Everybody's getting into the black belt thing and having 50 stripes on their belt, and everybody's these great Don masters who's supposed to be able to touch you with 2 fingers and you die. So they're saying, okay, we're tired of bring that crap in here and show me that you can touch me with 3 fingers and I'm gonna die.
Right.
So I was with that. Okay, I understand. All this bowing to people who probably can't even really fight.
Right.
But it made sense then. But I think it bred and bled so far that the respect and discipline got lost towards the instructor.
Right.
Because the bow is still a way to show your instructor respect and to show humbleness to your instructor.
Right.
And so now the whole thing of, you don't have to bow, it went from, hey, we don't bow at each other because we just can fight.
Right.
So we don't have to do that. And that was kind of like a joint thing and an agreement between guys who respected each other.
Right.
But I think now what happened is rolled over to where the people who don't respect people, you say, I don't have to bow to you. I'm not bowing to you. Screw that.
Yeah.
And then the instructors are even saying, well, I don't want to lose business, so I'm not going to make them bow.
Right.
So now you got these guys you loading all these shotguns and these weapons and turning people into these weapons, and they don't have that discipline there. So MMA, of course, regular martial arts is far more disciplined than sport MMA.
Which I think that even the difference, from when you used to fight compared to sport MMA now, I think that the disciplines even changed because most people in sport MMA now, they fight on one league and they have nothing else that they have to even look forward to. When you fought, I feel that you fought on so many different leagues and you traveled to so many different states and so many different countries that you had to stay disciplined because you never were in your own league. And when you stay in your own league, I think that discipline completely gets lost.
Covering on that, you're more protected on your own league.
Yeah.
Like when I started fighting, I was with Brian Madden. I fought for the SFC. I knew that Brian was going to take care of me.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean I had to fight John Rinkin. I had to fight Adrian Serrano. I lost to Adrian Serrano on Brian Madden's show.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So he wasn't taking care of me that
Right.
great. But it was still, I knew I was good.
Right.
Even if it came to getting a bottle thrown at me from the audience.
Right.
Because I knew this was his show. I was on the poster. He was going to try to make me look good because I was his boy. And yeah, a lot of times, to be a world-class fighter, you got to travel and go fight where people don't like you.
Yeah.
When I went to Japan, that wasn't, that was Ron Smith and I were in the airport in the middle of the night. We didn't get picked up.
Right.
The guards were coming. Nobody spoke English. They had machine guns saying, get out. The airport's closed.
Right.
Pointing the gun, bumping us with the guns. We didn't know what was going on, but they closed the airport in Japan. You have to leave.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so when I went to fight there, we got picked up by the Yakuza in black limos and everything else. And they had everybody tattooed up, young kids with their hair frosted, everybody in black suits. You didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
And when I went to fight, the crowd was all Japanese,
right.
and I was fighting a Japanese guy. So everything was against me. Same thing. We went to Hawaii. I'll never forget when we walked out and I fought in Hawaii. There was actually a whole group of Hawaiians and they were screaming racial stuff.
Yeah.
I'm scratching my head. Wait a minute. How the heck y'all scream? And I'm getting ready to go down there, hey, mother, and beat them up. But I'm like, man, I'm not even in my home. And there was, with my crew, I think there was maybe 10 of us.
Yeah.
Team USA, there wasn't even a lot of us. So I had to have a strong discipline and a strong composure that was true as a true warrior. I couldn't just be a guy on the streets who just want to knock people out, because when you get under that kind of pressure, you got to hold your composure.
Right.
And that's what they're doing. They're trying to break you down mentally before you even go in there so their boy can beat you. So I got to get past them, and not even let the street Jermaine come out that would have murdered somebody like that.
Right.
You know, I've been in jail over stuff like that. Somebody screaming crap like that to me. So I got to go to the ring and then hold my composure. And then now I'm fighting one of their people while they yelling this crap out in the audience, you know, and then I'm beating him up and knock him out and whoop his and stand up and get my hand held. And I'm looking at this group of guys saying, I got to go to my hotel in their neighborhood.
Right.
You know, so I don't have an army with me.
And that's why I like to bring it up, because even when you talk about the verses, we're talking about everyday people in sport. And I almost like to even bring it a little bit farther and say, when you fought, even compared to when they're fighting now, because I still like the listeners to know that there's a big difference between what you went through when you were a fighter compared to, I think, what fighters are doing nowadays. So.
Definitely. Like I was saying, now a lot of times when fighters try, but I'll say this because, you know, when we sent Raymer to Brazil to fight for that kickboxing tournament, that didn't go good. You know, he fought good. He went there and he got set up. He had to fight. He's an amateur, and they made him fight their pros, their best, and he beat one of them. Right. And so they didn't like this, so they put their best top one in. They weren't going to let him win. Right. You know, when they went to Florida, you know, and they threw him in a Roach Motel, and they told Drew, hey, your guy made weight. He's fighting a guy 30 pounds bigger than him. I got a picture of this guy. I'm like, what the? And Drew went there and knocked his butt out. You know, and they got buddies, boys in the audience with guns and everything else. So that's being a real true warrior and that discipline.
Experiencing all that.
Yeah, those Drew and Raymond called me. They're like, man, this and that, da 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 da. And I said, hey, look. Don't worry about that. You worry about the fight. You understand me? That's what you came there for. Remember that. You didn't come there to get a nice hotel. Right. You didn't come there to get this. We'll take care of everything from there. Go in there and knock that fool out. Yeah. And he said, you know what, sir? Yes, sir. But that was discipline. Yeah. You know, and I could talk to them like that because they're still traditional, you know, martial artists with me. Right. But, you know, with the lack of discipline in sport, which I've had sport MMA guys with me who just, you know, we don't want all that crap, man, all that bowing and tradition. I just want to whoop somebody. You can't talk to them like that. Yeah. And therefore, in a situation like that, they would have panicked and bailed, or they would have did something stupid. Yeah. But because they had discipline, they went in and they won. You know, he went in and I got a phone call from Drew, man, I knocked him out. Like, yeah, and he sent me a picture. I was like, whoa. I said, I'd have been scared of that dude. You know, he's bigger than me, you know. So definitely, we know that, you know, MMA, mixed martial art training has more discipline than sport MMA. I'd like to see sport MMA get more discipline, and that's not saying there aren't sport MMA people who don't have it. But, you know, with the sport MMA people who do have it, they are traditional martial artists also. Yeah. Like I know, you know, we got guys coming to my gym with black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they went through the process and trained to get that ranking, and they're good dudes. Right. You know, but they train sport MMA, and they're over there banging and doing what they do, but they still respect, bow, take their shoes off before they come on the, you know, all the things, you know, nice and humble, you know, when something's going on. Sir, you need my help? You know, yeah, I sure do. You know, and they jump up and help with things. So it can still bleed over into sport MMA, but as far as which one is more disciplined, it'd definitely be MMA. Yeah. And of course, the last one. So
it might be the fans more than even the competitor that we're talking about.
Oh, you're gonna take me down a whole nother road. A whole nother road. Well, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say, because now we get into history, and I'm gonna say the fans of MMA in America. Now, when I fought in Japan, you know, if you remember, I don't know if you remember Pride. You probably never knew what that was. Mm-mm. When the fighters fought, the crowd was silent. Right. When I fought in Japan, they were dead silent out of respect for you as a samurai warrior. Right. And no matter win or lose, they loved you. Oh my God, they come. It was so funny because they just want to touch you. Because they feel that you're like, you know, that fighters are right beneath God. Right. And then, you know, everybody else is under there. Yeah. And they all these Japanese, they running up, their eyes all big. I'm like, what the heck going on here? Yeah. And they come in, and then, you know, the people with us, they just want to touch you. And I'm like, just touch me. And they just like, they lose it. You know, I'm like, what am I, the Pope over here? You know what I'm saying? So, but the thing is, I think what happened with MMA, which was smart business-wise, which is, you know, we live in America is about capitalism, you know what I'm saying, is that the fans from when we remember with, what was it, professional wrestling. Yep. All right, professional wrestling was the bloodthirsty, rude, flip everybody off, entertainment. Yeah. You know, it was a crossover from the movies to the ring, you know, except they were saying it was real. Right. And then I think it was Geraldo Rivera who exposed that it was fake, did the first big news report, and he was actually exposed it to this reporter, and the reporter smacked him in the ear. This feel fake to you? And, you know, to try to say it's real. And he sued the wrestler for it. But after that, everybody started realizing that it was fake. Right. You know, that this stuff's not real. So that fan base needed a new product. Yeah. here comes MMA, because MMA when it first started as NHB, it was a solid, like, respectable thing. You know, people were bowing, going through, you know, the tradition, and they cut that out.
Yeah.
And you see the commercials now, it's all blood. It's wild, crazy, almost like the WWF, what you call the world, and that's old school World Wrestling Federation, the title I'm using. It's feeding to that audience.
Yeah.
That bloodthirsty that want to just see somebody get their head cracked open. You know, they're not, I didn't come to pay for no respect and all that. If I want to pay for that, I go to martial arts school. And, you know what I'm saying? I'm coming to see somebody bang.
Right.
So I think that was a smart move for Ultimate Fighting, and, you know, the all the fight leagues that move themselves to that angle where, okay, here's the promotion way we're going to promote and market this. So all those people who are out there saying, what, wrestling is fake?
Yeah.
You know, well, wait a minute. This is real.
Yeah.
And it is.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not mad at them at all. You
so
know,
in saying that, the sport fighter may have some of the things that we talked about, even like discipline or whatever, but they may not expose it because that's not what the fans want to see.
Exactly. Ooh,
so,
that's perfect. That's perfect. You know, and they don't expose it because ain't nobody buying it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You could, if you guys, you can have the best stuff in the world, but if people don't want to buy it, it don't matter.
Right.
You know, you gotta sell them what they want, and that kind of goes with the last thing on integrity.
Yep.
You know, sport MMA, as far as, you know, you deal with cross training, you deal with I think sport MMA fighters look more at their trainers as a coach, like a baseball team or a softball team or a basketball team. And, you know, you can leave your basketball team and go to another team. Your coach is, oh, thanks, coach, see you, bye.
Yeah.
That's all he is to you. Where martial arts, mixed martial art, your sensei, your sifu, your instructor is supposed to be a lifetime friend, a lifetime mentor.
Right.
You know, you're supposed to pick the right one off his credentials and, you know, and his personality, and you stay there.
Right.
You stay loyal, you stay dedicated, and they're helping you to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Where sport MMA, I think, you know, people bounce around more because it's, you know, they're moving faster. It goes back again that they don't have that time. They're like, dude, I got to fight next week. I'm fighting tomorrow. You know, I don't have time to, you know, go meditate on a mountain and wait for some butterfly to come flying by to figure out what you're trying to teach me. You know, so that kind of creates that separation with the integrity. And I think that still, like you say, there still are sport MMA people who do have those traits. And I think I would have to say,
when you can't really tell. You can't tell the difference.
Well, you're not getting
when
paid
it's for entertainment.
Yeah, you're not getting paid for it. I remember when I was supposed to make the Ultimate Fighter show.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons I got picked is my last interview. I scared everybody to death. Because I told them if somebody, you know, because those guys were peeing at each other's doing all kinds of crazy stuff for entertainment. And I said, if somebody does that to me, you know, you probably gonna find a body hanging out front, and I'm gonna be in Florida somewhere. and they believed I meant it. You know, so I thought, oh, thank you, Mr. Andre, have a nice day. You know, so I kind of messed myself up on that, but I wasn't thinking about, I wasn't educated that, Jermaine, it's a TV show.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be better for you to probably go just punch a dude in the face. You know, oh, really? Okay, I can do that. Boom. You know, all right, ratings just went up. Cool, awesome, man. I got to punch him in the face like I wanted to for sabotaging my food.
Yeah.
You know, but nowadays a lot of the integrity, the samurai way is not selling, because even like say you watch me when I fought, you know, I always had straight face structure, you know, and I was trying to show the calmness and the you know, the coolness. But you take that and put me next to The Rock. You know what I'm saying? What's cooking and who smells? And put me next to Hulk Hogan. Everybody gonna go over to them. You know what I'm saying? Even though what I'm showing may be better for, you know, a person, you know, as a developing character, still the audience ain't paying for that. They're going to buy Hulk Hogan's tickets over here when he going crazy hitting somebody in the head with a chair. They're going to buy The Rock's ticket when he said, "What do you smell when I'm cooking?" You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing that I didn't know. And if I'd have known that when I went and tried out for Ultimate Fighter, I could have put on a show, because I could act. I could have led everybody to where I wanted to lead them. But I do believe that there are a lot of MMA fighters in sport MMA who have strong integrity and who are dedicated and respectable to their trainers and things like that, and you don't see it anymore because it's just not really what people are looking for.
Right.
All right, so let's go over the scorecard of MMA versus sport MMA, and what we pick for athleticism.
Sport MMA.
For practical,
MMA.
Which one is more practical to learn? We said MMA because the stuff that works in MMA they ban in sport MMA, or they end the fight too fast. Which one's more learnable, easier to learn? We actually said sport MMA because there's not a heavy requirement or expectation of technique and learning it properly. Which one is safer? You know,
MMA.
and that's something, again, I got to voice strongly that depends on the instructor, you know, but MMA.
Yeah.
Which one's more popular? Of course, Sport MMA. Better structure, we picked MMA. Of course, you have, you know, better structure, lessons put together. Which one is better discipline? Picked MMA.
Mm-hmm.
And which one has better integrity? We picked MMA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, this is Jermaine Andre closing out. Thank you for listening. Hope everybody got a chance to learn something. So always trying to give you information. And always remember, when you listen to me, you listen to us, I'm not trying to tell you what to think. I'm just here to encourage you to think and trying to give you ideas on how to help you think, because I want to know the right answer. And if you've got thoughts or different opinions, you know, Facebook me, message me, you know, send something in, let me know, show me a different angle. You know, if you can prove me otherwise, I'm always wide open to learning new things. Yep. And that's what we're here to do, is just to get that brain moving so we can all come together and get the right answers, you know, in our life fight. And we can all win this life fight together. Thanks for listening.
For all things Jermaine Andre, get books, get trained. Learn the secrets behind his brawn, his brain, and his edge. Visit JermaineAndre.com. Life Fight with Jermaine Andre is another positive production of RareGem Productions. Thanks for listening.